Ragnar Lothbrok, the heart of the north. The wind howled across the cold shores of Kattegat, carrying with it the scent of salt and smoke. In the distance, longships rested upon the waves, their dragon heads rising proudly above the mist. Among them stood a man whose name would one day be whispered through the ages, Ragnar Lothbrok, farmer, warrior, explorer, and king. But before the legends and songs, there was a man, flesh and blood, heart and longing. His story began not with a crown, but with a dream. I, the farmer with the eyes of a king. Ragnar was born into a world of ice and steel. The north was harsh, its winters long and merciless, its people hardened by hunger and war. Yet, even as a young man, Ragnar saw beyond the fjords and mountains that confined his kin. While others spoke of plunder and survival, he dreamed of new lands, of green fields across the western sea. He worked the soil beside his wife, Lagertha, the shield maiden whose beauty was matched only by her ferocity. Together they raised their children, Bjorn and Gyda, in a small wooden home overlooking the restless sea. But Ragnar's heart was never still. He would gaze out at the horizon, watching gulls circle above the waves, and whisper to Lagertha, "There is something out there. I can feel it. The gods call us to sail west." Many called him mad, others mocked him. But Ragnar was not a man who waited for fate. He seized it, too. The birth of a legend. When no earl would listen, Ragnar defied them. With his friend Floki, the eccentric shipbuilder and devoted follower of the gods, he crafted a new kind of ship, swift, sleek, and strong enough to brave the open sea. Together with his closest men, Rollo, his fierce brother, and a handful of brave warriors, Ragnar set sail toward the unknown. The journey was perilous. Waves towered like mountains, lightning split the sky, and more than once death seemed to beckon. But when they reached land, what they found changed everything. The shores of England. The raid on Lindisfarne was swift and brutal. Ragnar's warriors stormed the monastery, their axes flashing in the rain. The monks cried to their god, and Ragnar watched them, fascinated. He saw no warriors, no defense, only fear. To him it was not merely plunder. It was discovery. The world was bigger than he had ever imagined. Among the captives was a monk named Athelstan, a man of peace who would become Ragnar's friend, his teacher, and the mirror of his own restless soul. Athelstan's words of faith and doubt opened Ragnar's mind. For the first time, the great Viking began to question not just the world, but the gods themselves. Third, love, blood, and betrayal. Success brought envy. The local Earl, Haraldsson, saw Ragnar's growing fame as a threat. When he sent assassins to kill him, Ragnar rose from the ashes of that attack, bloodied, scarred, and unstoppable. He challenged the Earl to single combat, and in front of all Kattegat, he slew him. The people hailed Ragnar as their new Earl of Kattegat. He stood beside Lagertha, proud and strong, with Floki and Rollo at his side. For a time their lives were blessed, feasts, laughter, the warmth of family. But fate is cruel. When Ragnar's ambitions took him away from home for long voyages, Lagertha's heart began to break. She was his equal, a warrior, not a shadow. Their love, once blazing like fire, began to smolder into ashes. During his travels, Ragnar met Aslaug, a mysterious princess who claimed descent from dragons. She spoke with wisdom and carried herself like one touched by the gods. Ragnar, ever curious, was drawn to her, and soon she bore his sons, Ube, Hvitserk, Sigurd, and the crippled yet brilliant Ivar the Boneless. When Lagertha learned of this, her heart shattered. She left Kattegat, her pride intact, her love buried beneath armor. Ragnar watched her go, knowing he had lost the truest part of himself. Fourth, the king of all Norway years passed. Ragnar's fame grew. Kings and jarls bent their knees or lost their heads. His sons grew into warriors, and his dreams, always his dreams, grew larger still. He led massive fleets across the North Sea, striking at the heart of England and France. Paris, the richest city in the world, trembled before him. With cunning and courage, Ragnar breached its walls, standing triumphant even as disease and betrayal gnawed at his camp. But within, the great king began to wither. He had everything: glory, gold, power, and yet he felt the emptiness of it all. Athelstan, his friend, had long since died, slain by Floki, who believed the monk's Christian faith had corrupted Ragnar's heart. Ragnar never forgave him, though he said little. He carried Athelstan's cross close to his chest, a symbol of confusion and longing. The gods he once trusted now seemed distant, silent.
He looked at his sons and saw only the shadows of the man he once was. Bjorn, fierce and independent, sought his own path. Ivar, brilliant and merciless, desired only conquest. The legacy Ragnar had built was slipping from his grasp. The fall of a king. One morning, the king stood before his gathered warriors. His hair was streaked with grey, his eyes clouded with weariness. "I am going to England," he declared, alone. The hall fell silent. None understood, but Ragnar knew this was his destiny. He had raided and ruled, but he had also betrayed his family, his gods, and himself. He sought not glory now, but redemption. In Wessex, he met King Ecgbert, the one man he had truly respected, and perhaps the one who had ever understood him. They spoke not as enemies, but as men burdened by power and the ghosts of their choices. Ecgbert offered him wine, counsel, and treachery in equal measure. Ragnar revealed his plan. He would sacrifice himself, so that his sons would have cause for vengeance. He knew Ecgbert would hand him over to King Aelle, the brutal Saxon who hungered for revenge. Ragnar did not resist. When the time came, Ragnar stood tall in chains, his face calm. Aelle ordered him thrown into a pit of serpents. The crowd jeered, but Ragnar only laughed, that same fearless, defiant laugh that had once echoed over the waves. He looked to the heavens and spoke his final words. "It gladdens me to know that Odin prepares a feast for me. Soon I shall drink ale from curved horns. The Aesir will welcome me home. I shall not enter Odin's hall with fear. My sons will avenge me, and they will be more famous than I ever was." As the snakes coiled around him, Ragnar did not cry out. His eyes burned with pride. His spirit rose like smoke into the storm. 6. The Sons of Ragnar. When the news reached Kattegat, the world seemed to stop. Lagertha wept in silence. Floki wandered the mountains, lost in guilt and grief. Bjorn, now a man grown, stared out across the sea, his jaw set. And Ivar, brilliant, ruthless Ivar, screamed to the gods, "I will kill them all. I will burn their world to ash." Ragnar's death ignited the greatest vengeance the world had ever seen. His sons united under one banner, the great heathen army, and descended upon England like a storm of steel and fire. Villages burned, kings fell. And through it all, Ragnar's spirit seemed to march with them, unseen but always near. 7. The legend lives on. Years later, tales of Ragnar were told by every hearth in the north. Children played at being Ragnar and Lagertha. Warriors invoked his name before battle. Even his enemies in England whispered it in fear and awe. He had been many things: farmer, raider, husband, father, king. But above all, he was a seeker. He sought knowledge, power, faith, love. And though he found both glory and ruin, he lived as few ever dared. Lagertha, in her later years, ruled Kattegat once more. She would often sit by the shore, staring into the waves. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, she could almost hear his voice. "We are born with this burden, Lagertha, to dream of more, to reach for it, even when it kills us." She smiled then, tears glinting in her eyes. Ragnar Lothbrok was gone from the earth, but he lived in every heart that refused to bow, in every soul that still dreamed of distant shores. 8. The Song of Ragnar. Sing of Ragnar, the wolf of the north, who sailed where none had sailed before, whose heart burned brighter than 1,000 suns, whose name shall echo forevermore. He loved and lost, he conquered and fell, but never did he kneel, for even in death his laughter rang like thunder on the steel. Ragnar Lothbrok's tale is not just a saga of conquest and kingship. It is a story of humanity, of love and pride, of faith and betrayal, of a man who dared to look beyond the horizon. The waves still crash upon the shores of Kattegat. The longships are gone, the warriors' bones turn to dust. But if you listen to the wind that sweeps across the fjords, you might still hear it. The whisper of a man who defied gods and kings alike. Don't waste your life waiting for something to happen. Go. Make it happen. And somewhere, in the halls of Valhalla, Ragnar smiles, the farmer who became a legend.